Hello, this is Dr. Stephen Greer, and this is Conversations with Dr. Greer, and I'm joined today by Linda Willitts, and we're going to talk about the really exciting events that just happened in the last couple of weeks in our expedition up on Mount Shasta in California, as well as the whole concept of morphogenic fields and how consciousness and our intent can manifest a new and transformed future. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Linda, for being here.
Oh, sure, you're welcome.
So I think to introduce this, I'd like to say that, many people have, read the work of Rupert Sheldrake and are familiar with his concept of morphogenic fields and how once something begins to happen, it can propagate non-locally in other places, and once something is a successful form or activity, it then recruits other agencies, as it were, through consciousness non-locality and awareness to make it happen further. A simple way of understanding this is the whole 100th monkey concept, where where they've done studies where a group of monkeys on one island will start to learn a new social skill, and then spontaneously on another island, where there's no direct contact between the one group of monkeys and the new group, they'll begin to do the same thing, and there seems to be this resonant effect through non-local awareness. And this has been studied and pretty well verified in the natural world, and it has to do with the fact that the entire cosmos is a conscious quantum hologram that's awake and that is living. And so this whole living conscious quantum hologram of reality has a way of integrating events, so that if something is successful and begins to work and be life-supporting, it is spontaneously, as it were, sort of recreated or begins to be facilitated in another place, in another locality. And this is exactly what we're seeing on a sort of a interstellar scale with the work that the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence is doing, CSETI. And you can read about what we do there at CSETI.org. And we just have concluded a week of gathering about 50 people up on Mount Shasta, California, which was wonderful, the things that happened. And one of the things that we have studied, of course, in regard to our contact work with interstellar civilizations, is the extent to which the leading role of the science of consciousness and the ancient Vedic concepts of sound and consciousness and awareness plays into their communication systems and their understanding of the cosmos. And I think that what we have found is that the more that we have people doing these sort of protocols that are rooted in a meditative state and are in resonance together, the more profound the experiences are that the group has. And that also people all over the world start having the same experiences or similar experiences. For example, I just got an email from one of our groups up in Canada who was not with us at Mount Shasta, but while we were doing that, they had gone out and had some similar, quite extraordinary experiences that included tones and electronic events and sightings that were directly overhead at the same time that we were having our experiences up on Mount Shasta. So if you begin to look at the whole cosmos as sort of a self-integrating, aware quantum hologram where there's complete integration of space and time through this aspect of conscious awareness, you can see how a group of people doing this has an enormous effect in the world, and that interstellar civilizations that certainly have to understand this to go faster than the speed of light. As they go through the light barrier, they cross over into what I call the transdimensional aspects of thought and awareness and the so-called conscious formed world of the astral reality. That what you find is that these civilizations understand these concepts very well and really respond when a group of people are in a group meditative state and with intent and coherence together begin to open up and invite contact, and then all kinds of amazing electronic events happen and objects come in and contact is made, but that the real core of it is in the understanding of non-local mind and consciousness, because as you go into a deeper and quieter aspect of awareness, you're reaching into that state that is increasingly universal and expanded. And in that expanded state of awareness, you're basically, if you operate from that deep level of awareness in your intent and thought, it has a much more profound effect than if you're doing it just from the superficial level of ordinary thinking. And so that's what our training program is about, is helping people to understand these concepts and then giving techniques and meditation so that people can become very quiet and centered and calm, and then from that quiet state of awareness intend and then in remote view distant places and make contact with these civilizations and then invite them to make contact with us here on Earth, wherever we may be. And so that those concepts, which are called the CE5 protocols, the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind protocols, are what we'll be teaching and doing out under the stars at this large gathering in Arizona, in Rio Rico, outside Tucson, Arizona, in October 24th, 25th, and 26th. We're going to have probably a couple of hundred people with us out under the stars at night and practicing these protocols for a mass contact event. But, the contact and the sighting is much less important than the effect we'll have in consciousness by having that many people intending to move forward in a state of universal peace. And the sort of meditative and prayer state with that many people can have an enormous effect on the whole planet. And this is because of this the morphogenic effect of consciousness as it manifests reality and manifests the future by having a large number of people in the same state together. And also during the day, what's going to be wonderful about this conference, you can find out about it at CSETI.org/contact. We're going to have the world-renowned crop circle researcher Colin Andrews with us, who is going to be reporting on a number of big events that have been happening with the British government and recent documents and revelations with the British government's involvement not only with UFOs but specifically with crop circles. And also what has been going on this year there, where there has been some of the most important sightings and events in his memory. And he'll give a full update and have images and slides of all the recent events that have happened there in the United Kingdom. And then also Dr. Lynn Katai will be speaking about the Phoenix Lights and the sort of ongoing contact she's had, but also the events around the time of the Phoenix Lights. As you all know, in 1997, when there was the massive mile-wide craft that was seen over the Phoenix area that recently Governor Fife Symington has come clean and admitted that he did see it and that it was something quite extraordinary. She has pictures of this and also saw it, but it's had sort of as a contact person, has had ongoing experiences with these. And she's also a fellow medical doctor, as I am, and she will be making a presentation, and then I will be leading the training for making contact with these interstellar civilizations using these advanced concepts of consciousness. And we will do a mass Puja together as well, since we're talking on the World Puja Network, we can mention that. And then to do the meditative techniques together using tones and the mantras that we've talked about in the previous World Puja interviews. And then we'll have a very high-powered laser system, and these electronic tones will be projecting out into space, as well as the meditative state that all of us will be in. And we'll do that every night, probably till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, up on this huge roof terrace of this remote resort out in the desert of Arizona. So it's going to be just an incredible event. So you're all invited. It's going to be October 24th, 25th, and 26th, and you can find out more about that at CSETI.org/contact. One of the things that we'll be doing also is talk about these energy systems and the effect that will have in transforming the planet. And Dr. Ted Loder, who's the science advisor for the OrionProject.org, will be doing a presentation about that. So it'll be an exciting event, and during the afternoons we'll be having presentations and showing various films and discussions, and at night we'll be out under the stars together. So it should prove to be an exciting three nights, 3 days and 3 nights out under the stars. And then one of the things that is really key about that, and the reason that we're doing this is the first time we've ever done something of this size, is because I'm convinced that the more there are people who are in coherence, and I'm speaking from a purely state of the concept in physics of coherent fields, but when you have a large number of people in coherence, in a deep meditative state, and then they are intending something to happen, such as transformation of the planet into universal peace and making peaceful contact with these interstellar civilizations, it has an enormous effect, much more so than one person or 5 people or 10 people. And it turns out the studies that were done by Dr. Robert John at the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, the Peer Lab at Princeton, and he was a professor emeritus of engineering at Princeton University. And Dr. John and I spoke about this some years ago, and he said basically what we're doing out under the stars is what he had been sort of demonstrating in the laboratory, where he found that if people put their awareness on, say, a robotic device and intended it to move in a certain direction, it would. It wouldn't be dramatic, but there would be a shift. And the same thing with the random number generators and other things of this sort, that there was that the non-locality of thought and consciousness even affected sort of inanimate machines, that consciousness and thought was that powerful. But that when there were 2 people who were either united or very close friends or loved each other and they did it, it was not an arithmetic increase. It wasn't just additive. It was an exponential increase in the effect that was observed. And so I'm thinking that, well, if we have a couple of 100 people doing this together out under the stars, what an amazing event this can be and how transformative it might be for the planet. So it's not just the normal sort of passive workshop. It's like we're going to all be engaged in doing this work together under the stars for the transformation of our planet away from the path of destruction and decay that it's currently been on, but to one of sustainability, new energy, peace, and interstellar civilizations working closely with the Earth. And so this is exactly, what the purpose of the conference is, because it's not just about learning how to do this, but we're actually going to be doing it together, which is what makes it very, very exciting to me, and I think to the other people who are coming. There are already over 100 people coming to this, and so I think it's going to have an enormous effect on the structure of the future, because I think this is how we create the future, is in awareness. And as we see this good future and intend it from a deep level of consciousness and meditation, I think it will then begin to manifest it and accelerate the quickening of that time of transformation. So the conference, therefore, is entitled Contact, a Countdown to Transformation, and that's exactly what I think we're in. We're in this sort of final countdown to the transformation of life on Earth, and it's really going to be the biggest transformation that we're in the middle of right now, but we're really going to pick up momentum in the coming months and years that we've seen on Earth since recorded history began. And I think this is why it's so exciting to be doing this kind of work together in a beautiful place like this. So I hope all of you who are so inclined will join us there.
Another really cool thing about this conference is we've got quite an international group coming. There are several people from each of Australia, England, Norway, quite a few Canadians are coming.
Yes, and all over the world. And what's exciting about that, and of course I know people from all over the world listen to the World Puja Network, is that then our intent is that people go back to these countries, and we've been doing this at these week-long trainings, but a lot of people can't take a whole week to do this. And they can go back to their countries and form a local contact group, and that's what's happened. We've heard from people from all over the world who have done this and gone back to their local communities and formed a contact group with 3 or 4 or 5 people. It doesn't have to be a large number. And like this report I was referring to in Canada, I've had just astonishing events happen where way beyond what people's expectations would be in terms of not just sightings, but actual contact and very intimate contact. So I think that this is the sort of thing that if enough people begin doing this worldwide, it furthers that whole resonant field propagation effect that will very much exponentially quicken the process of global transformation and lay the foundation for a peaceful and sustainable civilization into the future that can go into space in peace, as opposed to what we've been doing stupidly in the last few decades, where we've really approached everything we don't understand as a threat, and have gone out in space with weapon systems. So this is a real turning of the corner, and I think that everyone can partake in this process if they understand that folded within them is the entirety of the cosmos. That literally the saying that there's an old saying from the ancient Sufi tradition that says the rhetorical question, and it goes, thinkest thyself a puny form when within thee the universe is folded. That in reality the entire cosmos is folded within the structure of this unbounded mind within every single individual. And when a lot of individuals are in that deep state of quiet mind and begin to intend a change or intend an action here on Earth, it has an enormous effect. And we have actually seen this out into the stars. We saw it recently up on Mount Shasta. We were up there for an entire week with about 50 people, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. And some of the amazing things that happened, and which we were able to film with these great new cameras we have. Actually, we're going to have two of these cameras that are, third, almost fourth generation night scopes hooked up to a digital camera. And some of the things that we are seeing and that are coming right into, when I say right into the field, I mean within 50 feet, 10 feet, 100 feet of where our circle is out under the stars. It's really quite amazing what kind of contact we're having, in addition to the sort of ongoing electromagnetic events and other sightings. And in the case of Mount Shasta, we'll get into this in a moment, fully materialized spacecraft that appear at very close proximity and materialize and then dematerialize within a matter of yards, maybe 100 yards or 200 yards from where we are, which is really quite astonishing. So that's what's happening, and I know that the interstellar civilizations are very involved in doing this. We're co-creating this together. It's not like we're doing this alone. They've been waiting for a rational response from humans for a very long time. Since the dawn of the nuclear era, when they became very concerned about how off course the human race was going, there have been attempts to make open contact. But the question always that goes begging is, who's going to do that? And this is something that a lot of people, it's sort of a basic question no one asks or answers, and that is, who at the State Department is making contact with these interstellar civilizations? Who in the Foreign Ministry of Great Britain is? Who at the UN? Well, I can answer that question for you because I work with all of these folks. No one. And so it's in the vacuum of the inaction of we the people not doing anything, the government of we the people, there has been a secret government program that stepped in that has really bollocksed up the whole thing and has tried to militarize the relationship and has made a large number of very serious strategic errors. And so this then is why it's important for us as citizen diplomats, as I call ourselves, as sort of ambassadors to the universe, to correct this imbalance until such time as the governments of the world wake up to not only the problem and also to the solution and start doing something that's rational and peaceful as opposed to hysterical and paranoid, which is unfortunately what happened when Eisenhower lost control of this whole issue back in 1954. And by the way, those of you who haven't heard previous shows, I got a document from the Ministry of Defense of the foreign government with a first-hand account of someone who was with Eisenhower in 1954 in the spring, when he actually did have a meeting with extraterrestrial spacecraft, occupants of a spacecraft that landed near Muroc, California. This was thought to be sort of an urban myth, and it is not. But what happened is that the people who were around Eisenhower at the time convinced him not to disclose that to the public, and he later regretted it. We know from people who had worked in the later Eisenhower years that he regretted that, and the military, industrial, financial interest has said, look, you don't want to disclose this to the public because, it'll undermine the tenets of Orthodox religious beliefs, but it will also undermine the whole concept of, the human race being supreme in the whole universe and the only intelligent life, which is, of course, an absurd concept in and of itself. And then on top of it, the energy and propulsion systems that had been figured out by 1954 in the fall of 54 would have replaced the need for oil and gas and coal and nuclear power. And so there are these nexus of interest that include not only theological and philosophical reasons, but also reasons of world global power and control that stepped in and basically convinced him not to do anything public about this. Of course, they always use the sort of red herring of, there'll be a public panic, and which I find hilarious. The only reason there'd be a public panic is that if a bunch of xenophobic morons got up there and said, they're here to eat us for lunch, which, of course, they're not. But I think that the people who always want to hang out the fear and hysteria card, the reason they play that card is that they're trying to hold on to power. And, the current order in the world order today is so rotten and corrupt and centralized in the hands of just a few corporations and individuals, 200 or 300 major corporations and individuals, that, at this point, more than half of the net worth of the world resides in the hands of these few 200 or 300 people and companies that they represent. And I think that what people have to understand is that the president in 1954 and the president today in 2009 is in the pressure cooker of these sort of hugely powerful special interests who do not want this information out for various reasons, not least among them of which is that there's a $500 trillion asset base in oil and gas and coal and centralized utilities and financial derivatives and commodities and petrodollar accounts, et cetera, and so on, that would have to be transformed into another macroeconomic system, both for energy and also the economy. And people really do not want to see that kind of change happen. And so the consequence of it is we're murdering the planet that we're living on. We're literally committing what I have coined the term planeticide, the intentional killing of an entire biosphere and thousands of species of plants and animals because of this kind of thinking. And this kind of thinking can only be transformed not by engaging it on the level of violence, but on a level of consciousness and a sort of a divine love and transformation and prayer and bold action. It doesn't mean we don't engage in bold, courageous action. We must. And this is something that we're very hopeful can be corrected and will be, because it must be. I think one of the things we're finding is that many of the doors that are opening for us right now are opening because they absolutely must open, that we are in the final sequence to this transformative process that's been underway on Earth for over 100 years, and that there's no more, we don't have another 100 years to delay these fundamental changes to how humanity lives on the Earth and lives together with each other, and that the time for universal peace and the time for free energy and the time for energy systems that do not harm the biosphere and for ourselves to be in space peacefully, fully acknowledging that we're not alone in the universe. These are all issues that must be addressed and that we are addressing with CSETI and the Disclosure Project and with the OrionProject.org. And I think that they are all part of the same central problem, and that is how our civilization needs to get from where it is to where it's going, and how is it going to make that happen. And it's going to happen first in consciousness through the morphogenetic transformative effect of a lot of us coming together in this state of consciousness. That's what people need to understand. And that's what we do. And so that's what this big event in Arizona in October, out in the desert outside Tucson at Rio Rico will be. And also what we've been doing for these week-long expeditions and day-long expeditions that we've been doing. We also recently had about 90 people with us out in a one-day expedition under the stars at the Noetic Sciences Institute in Petaluma, California, just after the Mount Shasta event. That was just wonderful, and a wonderful training event with great people there. And we're going to be doing one in Asheville, North Carolina, this weekend, actually. I mean, it's full, but we're having a lecture that anyone in Asheville hearing this are welcome to come. But we'll be doing one in Costa Mesa, California, in November, and we're going to be doing a lecture, but then a day-long training there. So any of these events that you guys want to come to, I hope you can join us, because each of them are ones where you can really get all the materials and learn how to do this contact, but more importantly, how to personally become engaged as an ambassador to the universe and work with other people and engage in this coherent state of resonance, so that we are having this transformation happen in a very coherent way. And by the way, this is a level of action that is the state of the true spirit warrior, that the real things that happen that transform the world is not at the end of the tip of the sword. It's at the tip of the mind, but the mind is rooted in this unbounded state, and then the action and the thought that comes from that. And so it's a very powerful state of action that flows from that deep level of consciousness, and that's why it's very, very powerful. And that's also why we're seeing this kind of contact happening on an escalating basis over the last few years, is that as more and more people become in this field of resonance, there is this potentiation of opening contact, and these interstellar civilizations respond most profoundly when there is a group of people who are in a state of coherence together.
And not only are we in coherence, but the ETs are in coherence, and you can really tell, that they're working with us, that they're also participating in the training, and it's so amazing how they interact so carefully with us. And one of the ways they've been showing us lately is through our radar detectors, and they've been activating the radar detectors more and more and more ever since November of 2007 in Joshua Tree. And Dr. Greer and I were just talking about how it's a morphogenic field, how the ETs are working together with the radar detectors. And you can really see when we have 3 or 4 radar detectors that have been in the field for several of these expeditions, and they have been highly activated by the ETs. But whenever we bring a new one into the group, it's like it takes a little while for the ETs to work with it and to activate it, and you can really tell that a new group of ETs kind of takes control of one of the new radar detectors, because we'll have the kind of the standard, actually incessant activity out of the few detectors that we've had at several different expeditions, and then all of a sudden we'll see, for example, in Mount Shasta, we had God consciousness ETs that have a really distinctive, brilliant kind of diamond white light that they flash when they merge into the atmosphere. And when we've seen that happen, one of the whole different radar detectors will start to go off.
Right. It is very specific. And what we're learning is that we're in these remote areas, and what you have to understand is that these electromagnetic detectors are picking up different spectra of electromagnetic energy. But what's happening is that even if you have 3 of the exact same type and brand, they will be on different spectra. One might be a laser spectrum, one might be an X band or a K band, but at the same time, which is technically impossible, because if it was coming from something linearly, like a beam of energy being shot towards us through space, which is how most people think of these things, which is what a police radar gun does or a microwave tower does. It would be it'd be the same thing, because we're not moving, we're stationary, et cetera, and so on. So what's happening is that they're actually coming from within space, what I call infraspace instead of outer space. They're coming from within space-time, because that is how transdimensional technologies work, that you're dealing with civilizations that, by virtue of the fact that they can go faster than the speed of light, when they go across the crossing point of light, they're actually phasing and resonating in an energy field that's not visible and even detectable with normal instruments, but then they can enter linear space-time from within. So you can have these various detectors or even a magnetometer, or we had someone with one of these electronic field meters at Petaluma, and they can affect those from within the space, within the circuitry, as it were, as opposed to something that's purely coming from a linear beam of energy. And so this is another whole concept of space and time and energy that's very transdimensional, of energy forms that are more subtle, but that have a very definite scientific basis. One of the things I remember talking about back in the early 1990s with a senior engineer with McDonnell Douglas, who he had actually been asked by Mr. McDonald, the man who founded McDonnell Douglas, to look into the whole ET issue and specifically their energy systems. And they had concluded back in the 60s that they had some kinds of devices that were physical devices, because these are physical beings. I mean, when they fully materialize, they have bodies and they have spacecraft and they make sounds and everything else. But that they have these technologies that interface with thought and consciousness. And this is where I came up with the concept of consciousness-assisted technology, which are in the CSETI materials, training materials that you receive when you register for this, but also technology-assisted consciousness, going the other way. It goes both ways, where consciousness-assisted technologies is where the consciousness of someone assists, say, the spacecraft to move or navigates it. But it can go the other way around, where a technology can assist someone's consciousness and conscious being to project or be present. And I've termed this at times, a very high-tech electronic astral projection, where we will have one of these detectors go off and we'll look over, and there will have been sort of like a lightning bolt light that will have come into the center of the circle where we're sitting out under the stars. And then we'll see sort of a form shimmering there. And you can walk right through it, but you can see it with your eyes, but it's very subtle. And it's sort of an electronic projection, almost like a hologram, of an extraterrestrial life form and their intelligence that's projected there, that's literally in the circle, but so much so that it is also within space-time affecting the electronic detectors and making them go off. So this is, I mean, people say, well, God, this is really getting into some bizarre stuff. I said, well, if it's interstellar, it isn't going to be, AT&T microwave and cell phone service. You're dealing with really, really interesting and advanced concepts here in science, technology, consciousness, all coming together. And that's what we're seeing. In fact, it reminds me of an account we were just talking about. It's going to be in the new book that's coming out next month in October. We, in 2000, went over to England, and we were in this crop circle that looked like an electron dipole, a magnetic field dipole. And we were there one night with these magnetometers, and a magnetometer is something that picks up the magnetic field shifts, the subtle shifts in the magnetic field of where you're located. And these had been specially built for us. We've since, of course, kind of had them fall apart because we've been out for them for so many years out in the field. But these were really interesting. They'd be very quiet when nothing was happening. Well, we were in this crop circle, and we started seeing these small, luminous, whitish beings that were there in the crop circle with us. And I would take one of them and walk over to it, and as soon as I got to it, it would beep and go off. And if I pulled it out of it, it would stop. And then I would see where there was another one of these beams, and I would go over and take the magnetic field, and it picks up the flux or the change in magnetic field, and it'd go off again. And soon everyone in our team, there were about, 12 or 15 of us, started doing this. And we started doing this sort of hilarious game of hide and go seek in a crop circle in the middle of the night. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's so crazy. But it's exciting because, people were they were helping people train to see and sense these when they were in this sort of what I call electronically projected astral form. But they were there clearly enough to see them with the naked eye, but subtly, and they were making these detectors go off. And we know that the spacecraft was also all around us, but shifted faster than the speed of light. And so, you have transposition of a craft with its occupants around us, but on a subtle level of energy that is more subtle than solid matter, but it's there, and it can be measured, and it can be observed. So, and then, of course, at times they completely materialize. Like at Joshua Tree, we had 4 ETs that fully materialized a few feet outside the circle one night, and we'll get into a few things that happened recently at Mount Shasta a week or two ago. That's really quite astonishing. But people need to begin to understand this whole concept of how consciousness-assisted technologies and technology-assisted consciousness become applied, and what does it mean to your experience? How do those things happen, and how you might experience it, whether it's in your room, in your backyard, in the sky, or when you're with a group of people making contact. And we've cataloged several hundred types of manifestations of these sort of ET technologies and how they appear. And that's what we're going to be really covering a lot at this conference in Arizona and Rio Rico in October, because it's very important for people to understand that. Otherwise, people miss 90% of the exciting action that's going on. I mean, any idiot can see an ET craft when it's fully materialized. But I always tell people that that's the least likely way that they're going to do it, because until we get some kind of non-militarized situation on this planet, we know that when they do materialize, they're targeted and tracked by weapon systems, and not every time, but frequently are fired upon. So they know that. And so, but there are these other rather strange ways that they manifest. And most people who've had actual contact with interstellar civilizations, when they hear these stories of what our team is doing, they go, "Oh my God, that happened to me, years ago, and I had no idea really what it meant. Now I understand it." And that's what's really so exciting about this. And it sort of is opening a doorway to an understanding not only in science and physics, but also where consciousness and thought are interfacing with science and physics and electromagnetism. And that's really what's exciting about what we're doing, because it's very pioneering experimentation and experience with this. But at the same time, it has the practical purpose of having a very intimate, ongoing rapport with these civilizations that's developed. And it is a rapport, and it's really quite beautiful.
It never fails to amaze us also, because the ETs are so creative in what they do. I mean, every single time we go out, they think of something new to do and to interact with us. And one of the things I'll mention about the radar detectors is there's this one radar detector that we call Walter, in honor of the man that donated it to us, that was in Crestone, Colorado with us in June. And Walter is extremely interactive as a radar detector, and he doesn't even need to be on to beep. I mean, literally, this happened several times, but just as one example, Dr. Greer and Dr. Jan Bravo and I were at the field site in Petaluma. I was showing it to them for the first time, and I had just found it myself, and so we were kind of determining where we wanted to make our circle, and Dr. Greer said, "Well, I kind of like this spot right here." We heard this little beep from Jan Bravo's backpack, and she pulls out Walter, and he's totally turned off, not lit up or anything, and he said, "Yes, this is the spot."
Right. And it happened that night also, coming back to the hood. And so here you have something that is switched off, and the ETs still can utilize it and put out an electronic tone to confirm something. I mean, this is really bizarre stuff that, scientifically makes no sense, but if you understand that you're dealing with civilizations that are in this trans-dimensional aspect of the cosmos, that are resonating at frequencies beyond the speed of light, where you get into, of course, my friends in these classified projects call it WSFM, Weird Science and Frickin' Magic. I mean, that's literally what they call it. But that's what you're dealing with, and so it's it's not your granddad's Oldsmobile. And, the kind of very literalistic ideas that people have about how ET contact is made and how it might manifest, that gets shattered in a couple nights being out under the stars together, because it ranges from these sort of things to, of course, fully materialized craft that are nearby. we may want to talk about some of the things that happened in Mount Shasta, because it was very, very exciting this year. I mean, the thing that you and I saw, Landon.
Oh, yeah. We saw, first of all, it was nonstop activity in the sky, just all kinds of flashing ET craft in the sky and whatnot. But there was this one particular really amazing event during the quiet period of a meditation. I happened to open my eyes, and Dr. Greer also happened to have his eyes open. We were looking at this one particular spot just to the left, the west of Mount Shasta, in kind of this clear space of sky between the tree and the mountain. And all of a sudden, this large, grayish, chevron-shaped craft, and it was the size of maybe a $50 to a silver dollar shape. It kind of drifted down and kind of twisted and turned in that space of sky that we could see, and then disappeared. And it lasted maybe a second, as I recall.
Right. It was like an arrowhead that was thicker at the front end of it, and it twisted, and it came in very quickly, and it turned, and it was fully materialized.
Yeah, it was shockingly amazing.
And yet not lit up. It was actually darker
right,
than the
dark.
background of the mountain and sky, and we were just sort of astonished because it was so huge. Because if you see a plane in the sky, and you hold your arm out at arm's length, it's maybe a millimeter or two. It's tiny. This thing was the size of a $50 at arm's length and close, which is big and very nearby. And we knew. And then after that, we had all this activity with the electromagnetic detectors and all these beams that were sort of electronically astrally projected all around us, and started seeing these objects, brilliant, bright, diamond white objects, 100 feet, 200 feet from the group, lighting up in the trees. And actually, these got filmed. It was really quite amazing to see how astonishing and quickly these craft can move into space-time and materialize very stealthily and carefully, I'm sure, given the fact that the National Reconnaissance Office satellites can pick them up instantly when they are fully materialized, but at the same time, unmistakably. And then one night, one of the most beautiful experiences I think I've ever had, we were out at about 3 in the morning, and we had rented this enormous kind of Paul Bunyan log house. It had these gigantic logs, and it was beautiful, at Mount Shasta that we used for our meetings, this lodge. And to the east of us was and northeast was the Mount Shasta, and we were out there late at night, and we were getting ready to go to bed, and we were just gathered there, about 11 of us, I guess, or so. And Orion was rising, and of course we've had all this amazing contact from the area of Orion and Sirius, which of course in the traditions of the Vedas and the Puja is where that knowledge came from, as well as the ancient Egyptian knowledge. And so Orion's belt was rising, and when the third star, if you know what Orion's belt, there are 3 stars, but this time of year they're sort of tilted on in so they look like a vertical column rising. So we saw 1 star, 2 star, and then the third star. When the third star was up and the whole Orion's belt was there, and we were connecting to those ETs in consciousness, an ET craft fully and completely materialized within a few hundred feet of us, vertically recapitulating the shape. So if you took a disc that you normally think is horizontal and turn it on in vertical, it was standing on in like that, just like Orion's belt, and it materialized and moved just majestically across the sky a few hundred feet from us, and then dematerialized a few seconds later, just acknowledging our connection to the interstellar civilizations that are out in the sector of Orion. And, Dr. Loader saw it. We saw it.
Yeah, I saw it. It was large.
Oh, it was large. It was if you hold your arms out, if you're sitting listening to this interview, put your arm out, and then hold your thumb and your index finger, and make about a 3 or 4 inch separation. It was 3 or 4 inches long. So it was a disc on end that big, and that is huge. And I mean, that's a very large object. It was eclipsed the size of any of the nearby houses or anything.
And it was really close by.
It was very close by, and it was just a beautiful acknowledgement. And then after we had this chevron-shaped craft that materialized and came in right to the ground that we saw on one night. I think it was the following evening, coming from the direction of Mount Shasta, and we got a great film of this. We had a chevron-shaped ET craft that was much higher up in the sky that came over and then did the same kind of twisting movement, turned on end, and then went out into space.
And it was lit up.
And it was lit. This thing was really lit up, but it was higher, so I'm sure it was at a safer distance from things they should be concerned about. And everyone saw this, and we watched it for quite some time, and silent, completely no sound from it at all. And as it turned and went out into space, you could actually see at some point it didn't just fade, it just dematerialized. And of course, there were 50 people there looking at it gasping as it did this. So these are some of the things. I mean, this is the sort of thing that just happens, all the time, and it's, people are going, oh my God, this is astonishing stuff. But what it's saying, is not the sort of, although it's very exciting to see these things, anyone would be, is what they're doing is they're acknowledging the power of consciousness in the morphogenic fields, and that the contact through consciousness and being in that state of resonance, and that when you have a group, we had an amazing group of people at Mount Shasta, very evolved people who really understood the spiritual concepts within consciousness and how non-local mind is integrated into space-time and meditative states and all of that. And we did 2 pujas, one that we did actually at this secluded site up in what we call the Cathedral Grove. It's a grouping of beautiful evergreen trees where we've had an amazing number of contacts. And the other one up at Sand Flats, up higher on the mountain of Mount Shasta. And the people in the group really understood and were having these sort of very, very deep experiences, up to and including some people who, for their first time, had really profound samadhi experiences that they had never had before, and experiences of the sort of the state of cosmic oneness in mind and things of this sort. And so I think that's why we had so much nonstop activity. It started from the first night on, and not only the electromagnetic devices, but these sightings and things that were very much in the field. I mean, objects that came, and actually on this DVD that people are going to get with this book that's coming out in October, this book called Contact, A Countdown to Transformation, that everyone who comes to the conference is going to get we'll do a signed copy of that book for everyone that comes to Rio Rico in October. That is going to have these images so that people can actually see these objects that materialize and then dematerialize very quickly within 100 feet, 50 feet of where we are sitting. And it's really an astonishing thing to see. And
it's amazing because they happen oftentimes so quickly. It's almost too quick for your eyes to see the light. And it takes a little practice, and you'll notice it, and we'll be able to see it. But our videographer named Todd has slowed them down, and it's just incredible when you see them in the slow motion. It really helps people to understand what kind of things we're looking at in the field, and what kind of things that we see quickly, and what those things really are. Literally, a triangle formation in lights in the field within 50 feet of our circle happens in a split second.
Right. Literally, and yet it's obviously there and fully filmed, and people go, how can that be? I said, well, if something is there and it's dematerialized, but then it kind of materialized briefly into our linear space-time, that's what you're going to see of it. And maybe you're just seeing some part of the energy field of that craft and some evidence of it. When the rest of the time it's there in a form that is resonating faster, or the frequency is beyond the speed of light, and therefore you could walk straight through it and not know it. And the other thing that happened is that we had an enormous sort of a sphere, burst of light that happened right in the circle that was a blinding burst of celestial cosmic light. And we also had, while we were having all these various electromagnetic detectors we had at one part of the circle, we had a very happy-sounding, sort of galloping electronic sound that happened 2 times. Everyone heard it. I think we may have gotten it recorded. But it was not coming from a detector. It was almost as if something invisible sitting in that part of the circle manifested this sound. And the sound was sort of not mimicking, but recapitulating the sort of cadence and tone of these man-made electronic devices, but in a way that was very, very joyous. And everyone heard this. And no one had anything that was making that sound. There was no one in that area of the circle that had one of these devices. And people go, how can that be? I said, well, they're there. They're dematerialized. You may not be seeing them unless you develop what in the Vedic tradition and the Puja tradition is called the celestial perception. But they're there. And then they will do these sort of things with sound to get your attention or to acknowledge something that's happening. And so that happened, which was really almost cool. Everything. We had light, we had sound, we had fully materialized craft, we had objects that flew over and then went out into space and turned and corkscrewed out, and all of this going on, over 6 nights, sitting out under the stars at Mount Shasta. So anyway, that's what we're going to be doing at these events that are coming up in Costa Mesa, California, in November, and at Joshua Tree, by the way, where the whole Orion transmission started. Mm-hmm. We're going to be doing that for a whole week in November. I don't have the dates here with me, but
the week of the 15th.
Yeah, the week of the 15th of November, and you can find out about that at CSETI.org. And we'll be doing this at this conference also in Rio Rico, and that's why we're scheduling it the way we are. We're scheduling it so that the mornings are going to be free because we're going to be up at night out under the stars till 1 in the morning. And so the mornings are going to be time just to sleep in and enjoy the wonderful pools and spas and facilities there. And then the afternoons we'll have these presentations by Colin Andrews and Dr. Katai and Lynn Katai and myself and others. And at night we'll be out on this rooftop terrace darkened in the middle of the desert, doing all this meditative work and laser work and what have you. So it'll be exciting. And we're really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a really successful training and conference for everybody.
It'll be really fun too. It'll be great.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we've never done something like this with this many people. But one of the things that everyone receives who's coming is the meditation CD, and they're actually 2 different sets, one for learning how to do the remote viewing and contact with, and one that is a meditation instruction CD for the mantra instruction. And everyone gets that before they come. And when people come to the conference, we'll have the book there and this new DVD that has the images and tones of all these experiences we've had. That'll be given to everyone when they check in. So it'll be a really fascinating experience. And I think that the effect it can have is really exciting because when you figure, you have a couple hundred people in this meditative state visualizing world transformation and universal peace and making contact like this. I tell people it doesn't even matter if we see anything in the sky because where the real action is in consciousness. It's in the light of awareness and intent, and that many people doing it will have an effect. We know it will. And that's why we're doing it now, because we really are at this time of the quickening of the transformation from one way that we have been living on the earth to another new era. And the era that we're entering isn't a 1,000-year era or 2,000. It's a 500,000-year era. It's an era it's a whole new yuga, as it's called in the Vedic tradition. That's 500,000 years, 5,000 centuries. That will be unbroken universal peace. In other words, it's not going to be a period of peace followed by the collapse into chaos and warfare again. It's going to be an unbroken period of universal peace and prosperity and new energy. And it's like nothing the world has ever seen. And so even though the world is in such a mess right now. A lot of times people don't realize it gets most chaotic and crazy right before such a big transformation happens, and that's the time we're living in right now. And so what I tell people is you have to be aware of the madness perhaps, but don't dwell on it too much. Let's focus on being the people who come together and within this morphogenic field of consciousness and higher states of consciousness manifest this transformed world, because that's what it's all about. Well, I think this pretty much concludes today. I hope this has been instructive for people to find out about kind of how all this works and how sort of the amazing effect consciousness can have when people come together. I hope to see some of you folks at the conference in Arizona in October, or at the Joshua Tree Expedition in November, or at one of the other one-day events that we do. And I really appreciate the people at the World Puja Network giving us this time to update you on what's been going on. There's been so much going on and excitement. We've been living all out of suitcases and jets for the last few months. It's been kind of exhausting, but it's still been wonderful. And I'd really like to thank the World Puja Network for giving us this time to share this with everyone. And I hope to see all of you soon at one of these events. And I'd like to thank Linda Willitts for all of her help. She's been organizing all these special events for us, and thanks to her, we're able to do them.
And thank you, Dr. Greer, for leading this most amazing project.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So until next time, you've been hearing conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and I was joined with Linda Willitts. And until next time, stay in a state of pure consciousness and be with us in meditation. Bye-bye.